Alrighty, so today we have another book review. It's been a little while since we had one.
I think our last one was The Grapes of Wrath.
I think so. That's been a few,
Weeks, yeah.
well, almost two months ago.
Yeah,
really.
sounds about right. We did
Yeah,
it at the end of July or kind
seems a
of.
lot longer than that. But
Yeah.
today we have a much shorter
Oh, no, it was of Mice and Men.
of Mice and Men. That's right.
Yes, that's right.
Today we have a much shorter novel though than The Grapes of Wrath. It's about the same length as of Mice and Men, a
yeah.
little bit longer. It's Animal Farm by George Orwell. I
Yeah.
think this is the first George Orwell novel or
Yes,
novella that we've covered
right.
on the podcast.
Hopefully not the last. I'm trying to get Luke 2 1984. He's dragging his feet a little bit.
Well, I have a lot of stuff to read right now too, but I'm not saying I don't want to read George Orwell. I've been wanting to read him for years, so this was a pretty
It was a good read.
neat experience for me.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the novella. I really did. It was almost a breath of fresh air, really. Its condensed nature was very nice, and it was really not a simple read, but it was
It
very
wasn't taxing.
digestible.
Yeah, it wasn't
Very
taxing at all.
digestible. No. You can read it in an hour or two, and it's
Oh,
just it's a nice
It's a cool read.
breezy book. But to start out with the story, we have a character called Old Major, and he's a prize-winning boar,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, and he's had this vision, right? So he calls a meeting of all the animals.
Well, let's back up a little bit because we're just jumping straight into it. To give it a little bit of a background, we have a farm. It's called Manor Farm, somewhere in England. I don't remember if it says really.
Yeah.
But it's owned by this farmer, and the farmer is like any other farmer. He works his animals hard, and he barely feeds them, right?
No.
Maybe that's not fair to all farmers, right? But in the book, he tries to maximize profits. He doesn't want to feed his animals. He feeds them the bare minimum, and he wants them to work every day as hard as they can, no days off.
Okay.
And animals really don't complain because
Well, they don't know anything.
they don't know anything else. That's right.
Really.
But then one day, Old Manor has a dream, and he knows it can be different.
Yeah. And he gathers all the animals
Right.
of Animal Farm into the barn that evening.
Mm-hmm.
And here he tells about the dream
Mm-hmm.
he has. And in this dream, he talks about, the animals throwing over the oppressions of man
Mm-hmm.
and creating their own, not really society, but in a way, yes,
Yeah.
their own
And-
society, their own animal farm,
Yeah, right.
which is neat. And he tells
Neat.
him he tells them about this paradise and how they must work hard to reach this paradise.
Mm-hmm.
And here he teaches them the song called "The Beast of
Of
England."
England,
And
yes.
do you have it pulled up, "The Beast of England"?
I can.
You can recite it for us.
Okay, here we go. Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, hearken to my joyful tidings of the golden future time. Sooner or late the day is coming, tyrant men shall be o'erthrown, and the fruitful fields of England shall be trod by beasts alone. Rings shall vanish from our noses, and the harness from our back. Bit and spur shall rust forever, cruel whips no more shall crack. Riches more than minds can picture, wheat and barley and oats and hay. Clover beans and mango wurzels shall be ours upon that day. Bright will shine the fields of England, pure shall its waters be. Sweeter yet shall blow its breezes on the day that sets us free. Animal Farm, Animal Farm, Animal Farm, Animal Farm. Never through me shall thou come to harm. So,
Disturbing.
Yeah, the animals start their own chant, but yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That second one I read that started with Animal Farm was a separate chant. It was the Animal Farm
Yeah.
chant. But
I'm wondering how the animals pronunciate these syllables from there.
yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing the pigs came up with this one.
I don't think it has to be too realistic in that sense, but anyways, Major, he tells them this beast of England, and
Mm-hmm.
it's greeted with great enthusiasm
Yes,
by the animals.
and they love it.
They absolutely love it. Sadly, though, Major does pass
Mm-hmm.
a few days after this. I think it's 3 days in the book.
something like that.
In the
yeah.
novel, yeah. And to go back a little bit, talk about the hierarchy of the farm here. Each animal kind of has their place in the
Yeah.
farm.
They
The pigs seem to be... Old Major is basically the leader of the...
Right.
He is. The pigs have a kind of a hierarchical stance to begin with. Not really, though. Not like we get later in the story.
No, not at all.
Anywhere near. But there does seem to be a class difference between
Oh
the
yeah,
animals.
and I think it's somewhat natural because they all have different jobs. Like the horses, they pull things. The hens, they lay eggs. The cats, they well, they don't really do much of anything at all. They all have a job, and for the most part, they all do that job. And some jobs have more of a noticeable impact than others,
Yeah.
which it's kind of strange because pigs, they eat and then they die, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think they have much of a job, but somehow they ended up.
They're the thinkers.
Yeah, they're the thinkers. That's true, but they don't have much of a visible role
No.
in the book, at least, and they end up at the top. Anyways, so Mr. Old Major dies. Oh.
And historically, you can see, and this book ties in a lot with major historical events of the 20th century too. Societal differences in the Soviet Union, and we'll get more into that later.
Right.
But
and
this book has been studied for societal reasons.
Yes, and it's shockingly similar to 1984. I won't spoil anything. When I was reading this book, every other sentence I was like, wow, this is just 1984 with different characters. Because it's almost exactly the same.
So you're saying George Orwell recycles his books?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the books are eerily similar. And I was talking to my chemistry teacher, Mr. Mitchell, about this, and he was reading a biography on Mr. George Orwell, who's just a pen name. Fun fact: his real name is Eric Blair, I think. Eric Blair or Eric Blaine. But he was reading a biography on him, and it discusses the process that he went through to create both books.
Yeah.
And it was very similar. But anyways, Mr. Old Major dies, and
then after the meeting, there's other pigs also. It's not just Old Major.
Right, but
and
Major's the leader.
He's
right.
the lead pig, I guess, yeah, the lead boar.
Yeah.
But there's other pigs too, and they're much younger.
Mm-hmm.
It's Snowball, Napoleon, and Squealer.
Mm-hmm.
And they've kind of taken
Taking the helm.
Old Major's ideas and his dream, and they formulated it into a
Reality.
philosophy called
Yeah.
animalism.
Yeah.
And late one night, the three pigs start teaching the animals
Right.
the philosophy of animalism.
Mm-hmm.
They get all riled up.
Yeah, and eventually come the 7 commandments of animalism, which are very, very interesting.
And I know I don't think it's meant to be funny, but some of them are comical.
It's really amusing, yeah.
They're funny.
So I'll read them out here. The 7 commandments. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. No animal shall wear clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animal shall drink alcohol. No animal shall kill any other animal. And all animals are equal. Number 7. So, that seems pretty reasonable at a glance, right?
Yeah.
Don't kill, don't drink. I mean, some of those are up for debate, I guess. But, yeah. Animals good, people bad. It's perfect for animalism.
But are people animals?
I mean, sure, but I wonder what they would have thought of a monkey, or like an ape. Yeah, because they're on 2 legs, and they don't have wings.
Well, they seem to be pretty. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Anyways, musings.
Huh.
But the 7 commandments are taught, and the animals kind of accept this, and eventually they decide they want to overthrow the farmer.
Yeah. But they're planning this.
Yes.
They're getting it ready. Until one day it kind of breaks loose.
Mm-hmm.
On this particular day, the animals didn't get fed.
Right.
And they waited all day.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end of the day, they finally
had enough.
They snapped.
Yeah.
And they went. It was at the grain area. The grain.
I guess it's like a barn.
Yeah, the barn. They broke into the storage area for the food,
Mm-hmm.
and here they were just going, I guess, hog wild, so to speak.
Right.
And while they were doing this, the farmers came out.
Yeah, they woke up and
They
were making a great ruckus, and the animals were making a great ruckus, and the farmers came out because they heard it, and they were trying to
made battle.
Yeah.
So to speak. Which, okay. Did it particularly say what time period this was set in?
I'm guessing it's like 1980s, right? 1950s. It doesn't really. There aren't really elements in the story that point to.
Are firearms around at this time?
I mean, I'm sure they are. And it's England, right? I don't know what the weapons policy is in England, but
I mean,
they had guns in
they
the
had
story.
guns, yeah.
Yeah.
They had guns in the story, yeah, but that was more of a figurative question. You would think that men with guns
Beat some animals.
could easily beat some farm animals, but that's not how it happens.
No.
And they end up running the farmers off the farm. They win the battle, shockingly. What did you think about that?
I thought it was amusing. There's some moments in the book where it's like, okay, this would obviously never happen, but it's a great sarcastic book. It's very sarcastic, and it's really entertaining. It's one of those books where you just have a good laugh about it.
Yeah. So, but basically, as soon as they're off the farm, they decide to rename the farm
The
Animal Farm, citing the title of the story.
Yes.
And then here they dedicate themselves to achieving Major's dream of this,
perfect society.
Right. Almost utopian in a sense for the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of get into the different characters here.
Yeah.
Such as Boxer. If you can go into explain a little bit about Boxer.
Yeah, so Boxer was a horse who was incredibly dedicated to animalism and the philosophies, and he's
very large and
yes, he's very large, very strong. He was the hardest worker on the farm, and he wasn't very smart. He didn't know much, but he knew one thing, and that was he would work hard. His motto was, "I will work harder." And he shows that multiple times throughout the book that he's going to be the hardest working animal on the farm, and it helps out a lot, really. And then it also talks about the pigs, like Luke had mentioned, Squeal or Snowball and Napoleon. Snowball he also strongly believes in animalism and in the philosophy that that Major had set out. And Snowball too. I mean, Napoleon does as well to an extent.
And at this point in the story, early on,
everyone does.
Everyone does, and I think that it's very similar to a lot of very new ideas.
Right.
When they're not put into practice for an extended period of time, everything
seems great.
Looks great.
Yeah.
Until it actually happens, and then you start to get real world influences and situations.
Things start falling apart.
Yeah. Not put into practice yet, but here it's happening, and at first, animal farms really prosper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They have all the food they can want.
Yeah, Snowball's teaching the animals how to read.
Mm-hmm.
Napoleon is taking a group of young puppies, and he's educating them really about the principles of animalism.
Yes.
Which is cool when you figure out those young puppies, they're learning that now, but they're learning it from Napoleon.
Yes, keep that in mind, folks.
Keep that in mind, who they're learning it from. You'll figure that out later in the story. And I think next, Mr. Jones...
It kind of comes back.
They come back.
Yeah.
For a while.
And they try to reclaim the farm with some other farmers.
And this is known as the Battle of Cowsend.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
I think this battle was a little bit closer, though, than the last battle.
Oh, yes.
It's much closer.
Yeah, and because there were other farmers, they had brought more firearms, and everyone kind of fights back, and Snowball, who I mentioned earlier, was actually awarded a medal and was hailed as a hero because he ended up taking some shots, but he fought back the most valiantly, and I think he kicked rifles out of the farmers' hands.
And they ended up claiming some rifles, too.
Yes, they did. And, it's just an action-packed battle, and I think Boxer ends up getting shot as well. Some animals take some damage, and someone dies, too. I don't remember who. I think it was a sheep that died.
It wasn't a major...
He wasn't a very important character, no.
But
someone died, and they were buried, and it was a big deal, and they had a funeral. Which is kind of funny. It's a very human concept.
How did they dig? I don't know.
I don't know. In any case, it was a very important battle, and they reclaimed some weapons, and they won. And that was a great morale boost, and a lot of new traditions came out of this. Like every Sunday, they would fire the weapon to commemorate the winning of the battle. And like I said earlier, Snowball was awarded with a medal.
And Napoleon, he's kind of set himself up almost as their leader too at this time.
Right.
And Snowball he's up there with them.
Right. And they have debates.
And everything, yeah, but it's going good. But then they start to quabble increasingly.
Yes.
Over the future of the farm. And here you get to see, again, comparing it with real human events, power struggle.
Yes.
Between these two. They are leaders, but they want to dominate over each other, especially Napoleon.
Yes.
Especially Napoleon.
I really enjoy how he's named Napoleon. It's a very subtle hint to not so subtle.
Really subtle.
No, it's not so subtle hint to the actual Napoleon.
Yeah, and so they're just trying to dominate and gain influence over one another. And here's where one of the main events of the story takes place. Snowball has an idea.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to build
a windmill.
Yes.
And he designs it all from scratch, and according to the book, it's very intricate, very impressive to all the animals, including Napoleon. But Napoleon does not like it.
He doesn't want the plan.
He hates it. He
pisses him off.
He absolutely abhors it.
Because it was Snowball's plan.
It was.
And here we get, again, another power struggle between the two.
Mm-hmm.
They call a meeting whether to proceed with the project or not. And at this meeting, Snowball gives a passionate speech in favor of course, his plan.
And he's very convincing.
Yeah, and at this he is very convincing, but Napoleon gives a very brief disagreeing statement, retort to Snowball's passionate speech. And then he makes this and I think and this is one of my favorite parts of the book. Like we said before, keep in mind the 9 puppies that he was training.
Yes.
He makes a very strange. It's a squeal. I think it's a strange noise. I think it's
like a pig squeal, like.
And at this time, the little puppies are not so much puppies anymore. They're
fierce dogs.
They're fierce dogs, and the dogs run in, and they end up chasing Snowball from the barn.
Yes,
almost a coup in a way.
Yes, all the animals are like, what just happened? And Napoleon is quick to jump on everyone's reaction, and he says that Snowball had been working in secret with the farmers, and that he was a traitor to the animal farm.
Yeah.
And all the animals at first are a little bit apprehensive of this idea, like, what? He was awarded a medal. He was a hero. And the dogs. He
was shot.
Yeah, he laid down he would have laid down his life for the animal farm. How could he have been a traitor? And then Napoleon gets all the dogs to growl, and everyone shuts up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just listen to what I say.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's plainly obvious that he has assumed full leadership of Animal Farm.
Yes.
He's a dictator. And not really in a sense. He is a dictator at this point. And from then on, he says that there'll be no more meetings.
No more debates.
No more debates. Just listen to what I say, and the pigs too. What the pigs say also. It's not just him really, but the pigs are
Squealer is a very important part as well.
They have more. Autonomy.
Say. Yeah. Because the pigs are the higher up on the hierarchy, like you said. And we also neglected to mention a very important animal earlier, Benjamin. He's the donkey, and he's been around for longer than anyone else.
Yeah, because he's been around. He remembers what it was like way before all this.
Right.
Stuff
and he remarks about this, and he's like, no one's been around as long as I have. He's very senile almost, but he's got a good memory, right? And he's been around longer than anyone else.
And you're right. There is a lot of animals that at the very beginning of the story, there's a character dump of
everyone, and it's kind of hard to keep track of.
Yeah. But for the story we're really discussing, it is important to the story, but it's not.
Yeah.
You can survive not knowing all.
You don't need to know the crow, really. I mean, I guess you kind of do, but you don't need to know the mouse, right? The mouse comes in every couple scenes and makes some noises and scuttles away, right? No big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it gives extra flavor to the story, but for our analysis of Animal Farm, we can survive without it.
Yes.
At this point, Napoleon, funnily enough, changes his mind about the windmill.
Suddenly, it's an amazing idea.
I know. And the animals, all the animals, especially Boxer, who's the not really manpower.
But he's a workhorse.
He's the workhorse.
Quite literally.
He's quite literally the workhorse here. They devote all their effort to completing this project.
And it's initially like a 2-year estimation for how long the project will take. And that's quite shocking.
Yeah.
How it seems like in the span of a few months they go from being ruled by a farmer, then having a little bit of freedom, then being ruled by a pig, and being forced to work very hard and very dedicatedly. I don't think that's the word, but
and at this point in the story, food was also not readily available like it was beforehand.
Too. Rations were being put in place.
So in order to achieve that better life, they're actually in a much worse situation than they were before.
But the windmill was proposed under the notion that it would create electricity, which is partially true, and that it would help create the paradise that all the animals were looking for.
Yeah, but eventually, once it's made, in all actuality, that's not what it's used for.
That's not what happens,
at all. It's used for making profit. But before that happens, they do build the windmill, but it is destroyed.
It's destroyed, yes.
In a storm.
Yes, which is kind of funny. But Napoleon actually takes advantage of it being destroyed and uses it to rile up the farm and say that it was another plot of Snowball and the other farmers. And what really made me laugh when it came to the comparisons with 1984 is that there were 2 other farms that they would slightly cooperate with, and Napoleon would switch back and forth over which farm was the good farm, which farm was the bad farm in the book. He did it constantly, like almost every other page.
And I think at this point in the story too, their animalism isn't really spreading to other farms, but the idea is getting out.
Yes, it is.
Other farms aren't an open rebellion like Animal Farm, but the sentiment, it's almost like a supposed Red Scare, I guess.
Yeah.
The base theory is spreading.
Right.
And so he claims that Snowball sabotaged, along with the other farmers, the windmill. He also uses this, like other major dictators at this time, they use these, I guess, false flag attacks. This isn't a false flag attack. Mm-hmm. It's a natural, not disaster, but it's a natural event that takes place and it destroys the windmill. Mm-hmm. He puts it over on Snowball. He uses that false event to create a purge, in a way.
To create a narrative.
A narrative.
Yeah.
Any animal that he thinks, in a very paranoid manner, disagrees with his leadership, he uses this to
execute them.
He accuses them of conspiring with Snowball here to destroy the windmill.
Yes. And he, like Luke mentioned, he executed them. And you might recall that one of the 7 commandments was, no animal shall kill any other animal. And some of the animals remembered this and they were like, wait a minute.
Wasn't it without cause?
Yeah, well, it's later. Originally, it's kill any other animal. And some animals are like, wait, did Napoleon just violate one of our commandments? And they went back to look at the commandments, and it was modified, no animal shall kill any other animal without cause. But they all just kind of brushed this off and were like, oh, maybe it had always been like that. Right, no big deal.
And we've looked over a major point in the story. What is the lifespan of these animals?
Probably not very long, like 12 years, 10 years, I don't know.
So as the story progresses, you're getting to a greater majority of these animals' lives.
Yeah, right. And just to think, they're going to spend a fifth of their lives building this windmill.
Yeah.
When they're already at the age of, like, some of them are probably already like 5, 6, 7 years old, and they're going to spend.
Yes, I mean, if it's a fourth, the average man lives to be 80 years old.
Right.
That's 20 years working on this windmill.
Right. I couldn't imagine. And then suddenly it collapses, and then they have to do it again. Right.
And then because it collapsed, and so some of those animals none of them had anything to do with it.
No,
but
some were executed, which is like there's even less manpower then.
Yeah, to do it.
But they do end up creating it. They do end up reconstructing it even quicker though, which is very impressive considering they had less manpower. But
and
Boxer
morale is very big in the story too.
That's true. Yes.
Morale. And those little puppies that you see earlier, we talked about how they were learning the philosophy. They're being brainwashed, basically. Mm-hmm. They were the ones that executed. It was a
Yes.
vicious dog attack.
Yeah.
Bill, you were saying, Nathan.
But yeah, they reconstructed the windmill slightly faster than they did originally, and you say, oh well, they just practice at it now, or they learn from their mistakes. But I just thought it was interesting how they were able to, even with less manpower, achieve the same thing in a shorter time period. And at this point in the story, it really emphasizes, George Orwell really emphasizes Boxer's work ethic.
Yeah, and he even takes up another saying, Napoleon is always right.
Yes, because Napoleon, like I mentioned earlier, Napoleon would go back and forth between which farms were good and which farms were bad. And if you've read 1984, this is just glaring reference to it. But that would always confuse the other animals. But Boxer would just be like, okay, whatever, Napoleon's right.
Napoleon's right.
Yeah.
And Napoleon's rewriting history, too, at this point.
Yes.
Snowball has always been the villain.
Yes, he always has. He was never hero. Never.
No.
And then somewhere throughout all this, the pigs they inhabit the house.
Yeah.
And they start
I was about to say,
sleeping.
they're acting like humans now. They're sleeping in
beds.
Sleeping in beds.
They're drinking alcohol.
They start drinking whiskey, which is
they're
breaking all of their commandments.
Yeah. So if you go back to the commandments, 2 of the commandments are no animal shall sleep in a bed and no animal shall drink alcohol. Well, those are changed to no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets, and no animal shall drink alcohol in excess.
And I think the biggest one here, and this whole thing it goes against what this whole philosophy is about, animalism. They start engaging in trade with neighboring farms.
Right.
With humans. Which is, that goes against the original principles of the philosophy.
And then the other animals do get upset at this.
Yeah.
But Napoleon somehow justifies it and starts working with a lawyer who's also a human. But
which is...
it doesn't make any sense.
It's funny in a way. It's almost creepy in a sense, too. Because you imagine a human-pig meeting.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. It's very weird.
But somehow he's able to justify it to the other animals that because he's meeting a lawyer, it's okay. He's not meeting with farmers.
He's justifying it, too.
Mm-hmm.
He's acting almost as like a propaganda head for Napoleon's regime here.
Right.
He's convincing the other animals, saying, hey, Napoleon's a great leader. Listen, he's only doing it because, trying to make it better for you. Everybody's cold and hungry and tired, and they've been way overworked. He's just trying to secure more resources for the farm.
But they also insist, all the pigs, they insist that it was better than before, that the conditions now were better than before when the farmers ruled by the farmers.
Yeah. And again, here, most of the animals, okay.
Yeah, they're like, okay. And they don't remember. But like we mentioned earlier, Benjamin, the donkey, he remembers.
He remembers too. And at this point, we have another major event that takes place. There's a neighboring farm, and it's run by a Mr. Frederick.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this deal between Napoleon about the purchase of some timber for Animal Farm.
Yes.
He supposedly cheats Napoleon out of this timber deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then he attacks the farm again. And it always comes back to this dang windmill.
Mm-hmm.
They dynamite the windmill and destroy it. Which, at this point, they rebuild it again. Now, these animals, if it takes 20 years of their lives to rebuild, I know they were building it faster each time. But still, most of their efforts going into building this windmill over and over and over again. And this time, it's built at great expense to the animals.
Yes.
Great expense. Because I think at this point, Boxer receives major wounds and a demolition of the windmill. Do they take it down again?
No, I think what happens is while they are attacking the windmill, the animals try to fight it off and it explodes.
That's right.
And the animals are harmed as it explodes.
Mm-hmm.
And Boxer, you're right, is harmed. And then after the aftermath, and everyone kind of settles in and realizes that the windmill explodes, Boxer goes right back to rebuilding it.
Working, but he's in a weakened state at this point. They were major wounds that happened.
Yes, they were.
He's weakened at this point. They go back to building it, but he's just not the same. And I thought this was kind of sad. Boxer, you're right. He's not the smartest guy, but he was always.
He's very dedicated.
Very dedicated to the cause.
To the cause, yes. Animalism.
While they're building it, he collapses.
Yes, he does.
He collapses. And Napoleon calls in. They said the vet.
Right. Which is kind of even that's funny as well, because if you had to call in a vet, it would be a human.
Yeah.
And it's just realize the irony in that they abhorred humans, but they kept needing them, that's interesting.
Yeah. In our reality, wasn't he taken to the slaughter?
Yes, he was.
For the slaughter.
Yes, a van came and picked him up that was supposedly the vet, air quotes, but it had a label on the side of the van. It had a label on the side of the van, and some of the animals could read, and the label read that like glue production or whatever, or horse slaughter. Some of the animals could read, and they started freaking out, trying to notify Napoleon because they were worried that Snowball had tricked them once again. And Napoleon was like, "Oh no, that's the vet. They just bought that van recently and hadn't yet changed the label."
Of course they did.
And then everyone's like, "Oh, okay, right, sure."
And then Squealer comes in. He says Boxer died peacefully on the way to the hospital.
Yes.
And he was praising our rebellion.
Yes.
To his very last breath. Of course he was.
Of course.
And yeah, you're right. He was a glue maker.
Yeah, a glue maker.
And he sold his most loyal follower to a glue maker in order to get money to buy alcohol and liquor.
A little bit of money, yeah. So we mentioned this earlier, but we didn't go into full depth on it. At this point, the pigs are alcoholics, like through and through. They've gained weight. They just drink themselves to death, basically. Not to death, but
not to death.
To stupor.
Yeah, I mean, they're very gluttonous.
Yes, they are.
I mean, they're pigs.
Right.
Something it's like
on the nose.
Yeah. And at this point, we kind of get a gap in the story for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And the windmill is not being used to produce electricity. It's being produced it's producing grain for profit so that they can sell.
And corn.
For corn. It's corn.
It's milling corn.
Milling corn. So the whole point of the windmill was to make life easier for the animals.
To create electricity.
It's not being used for that.
No, it's not.
And all the profits are going to the upper classes of the pigs.
Mm-hmm.
So this class system is being created.
Yes.
It's already here, but it's exacerbated at this point in the story.
Yes.
Pigs are walking on 2 feet now like human beings, which breaks most of the commandments.
Mm-hmm.
They're walking upright. They're carrying whips. And I think this is the big one. This kind of freaked me out when I read it. They're wearing clothes.
Right, yeah. Yes. And that's, once again, a violation of one of the commandments. The third commandment.
But that doesn't matter for very much longer.
No.
Because they throw all that out the window.
Yes, they go to the commandments, and they change it to
all animals are equal.
But some animals
are
more equal than others.
Yeah. And that just, if any of the original philosophy was left at this point, it's out the window.
Yeah.
Napoleon and his pig, I guess cronies in a way, have replaced the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
They have become almost equal in the eyes of the surrounding farmers too, which I thought was weird.
They start meeting with the other farmers.
Yeah, they're having dinners with them. Napoleon invites a farmer named Mr. Pilkington.
Yeah, I think so. And if you recall, that was one of the farmers, the other farmers that they were once at war with.
Yeah. Are now allies. And at this dinner right here, Napoleon declares his intent to ally himself with humans against the laboring classes of both the human and animal worlds. Mm-hmm. So they're completely flipped.
Yes.
We're completely flipped. They're not even going anywhere near Old Major's Animal Farm dream right now, the Beast of England philosophies. They want to change the name of Animal Farm back to
the Manor Farm. Right. And they do.
They do. Claiming that title is the only correct option.
Yes, and once again, some of the animals are a little apprehensive. Anyone that disagrees is thoroughly executed.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of...
And at this point, they're having this dinner and they're all wearing clothes. And the animals are looking in through the windows. Mm-hmm. They can't tell
who's the pigs and who's the human. Right. Pig. And then Benjamin's still kicking at this point, and he's just looking around and he's thinking, what happened? Right. we're back at the same place where we started. And yeah, if you've read 1984, Benjamin reminds me of Winston Smith. I think that they're both the senile old men that were around before it all started changing.
Yeah.
And then I won't spoil this, but Benjamin, I'll cut this part out. Never mind.
Historically, too, that would have to be weird. Because can you look up when the Bolshevik Revolution was? I think it's
Sure.
1917.
I think that's right. Yeah, 17.
It's not 1917. So let's say a child was born in, well, heck.
1906.
1906.
Right.
They're 11, 12, or even 1900.
Yeah, right.
From anywhere from 10 to 17 years old, they know what's going on.
Right.
They lived in Tsarist Russia. They see the Reds come in, the Bolshevik Revolution. They live most of their life in communism.
Mm-hmm.
And then they see the fall of the Soviet Union and the return to, well, I'm not going to say democratic values. That's inaccurate, but
more
the collapse of
democratic.
the major communist superpower.
Right.
So they're able to see before and after, and there has to be that kind of same sentiment between them too. Like, what happened? Was it all worth it?
Yeah.
Because we went through all that ordeal, and at the end, I mean.
Yeah. Well, when we interviewed your cousin, Mr. Phil Hawks, he kind of talked about this, how when he was in those former Soviet countries, he faced some, I don't want to say resistance, but apprehension from the locals.
Yeah.
Because that concept of, Americans bad,
Mm-hmm.
us comrades are the right? Us comrades are the only good people, for lack of a better term. Yeah. That idea was so ingrained to them that he still saw that 30, 40 years later, right?
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. And
it would have been neat to, it's too late now, but to interview a person who did see, because they saw the rise and fall of an empire.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And its whole entire span, and most of the time you don't
get to see
you
that.
don't get to see that.
Usually empires last a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Right?
But they really did, and I think it's a very unique thing.
Right.
And it was probably it could have been, at some points, traumatic too.
Oh, I'm sure.
In a sense.
Just with everything that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's animal form. You can observe and delve into the underlying theories behind how it correlates with real human events.
Right.
All day. We could talk all night about that. You want to give your thoughts on that?
Yeah. One time, we were talking about Star Wars, and you kind of joked about how Star Wars is based on real events.
Oh, I was serious.
Well, yeah. You mused on it, not joked.
Yeah.
You mused on it. And I kind of look at Animal Farm that way. Right? There are some very heavy parallels.
Very heavy.
And there's this another book. I don't remember what it was called. It was something Swans.
Mm-hmm.
It was a true story about China when Mao Zedong ruled, and it just talked about the horrors that the people had to endure in that country at that time. And one of my friends read it, and they had also read 1984, and they just remarked on how similar the two books were, like scarily similar, almost exactly the same in every way.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that 1984 is a fictional work. Animal Farm is a fictional work, obviously.
Well, you hear people all the time, even those who are not familiar with George Orwell's works specifically, refer to that's Orwellian.
Orwellian word. Yeah.
And what year was this book published?
45 was Animal Farm.
Okay, 45. That's not that long ago. At the same time, it's a good bit, and you're able to look at events that take place here and see that directly translated into modern history.
Yes.
That took place after this book was published.
He was very
insightful.
Yes, he was.
Insightful. And stuff like this happened way before that too.
Right.
It wasn't original. I think he just grasped the flow of human events, how they take place, and he accurately described that in the book.
If you read about George Orwell, he was born in England, I think, and he lived for a time in India.
Yeah.
And he was part of a police force down there, and
that was Imperial India.
Yes, it was. And he also fought in a few revolutions, and I think he was in one in France, perhaps. I don't know. He fought in a few revolutions, and later he came back home and he started writing. And I think that those experiences that he had, both in India and in fighting in those revolutions,
war has transformed many authors.
Right. I think that really has changed how he saw the word and how.
Have you read Lord of the Rings?
I have not. No.
J.R.R. Tolkien started writing the Silmarillion, which is the base work for Middle-earth.
Mm-hmm.
He started writing that in the trenches of World War One.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he saw that when those soldiers that went to the First World War, most of them signed up with great vigor.
Mm-hmm.
They'd read stories all their lives about
These
knights and men charging into battle on horseback and with swords, and the king really played into that too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the king's been going out and fighting, and they get to the actual war, and it's extremely industrial. There's mustard gas, there's tanks, there's mortar shells and planes, and it's not anything like, you know, the great charge, like the charge of the Lightning Brigade. Have you read that?
Mm-mm.
You know, it's talking about the Great British Cavalry, you know, riding in. It romanticizes almost that classical warfare,
mm-hmm.
and that experience in World War I, seeing that almost the loss of magic, directly influenced his writing Lord of the Rings and all of his other novels. So I think, you know, you're right. His major historical events has shaped,
mm-hmm.
for good and bad, modern literature.
Yeah, and I often think about how we look back maybe 50, 70, 100 years, 50, 70, 100 years, and we see these famous works of literature, right?
Yeah.
This book was written 78 years ago. Was it popular at the time, right?
Mm.
And now I think back to where we are today in 2023. I'm sure there are some books that are being published this year that will be massively popular in maybe 50 or 100 years.
Is the culture set up right for that, though?
I don't know. And that's what I'm really interested to see. Because we'll live 50 more years.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, right? We'll live 70, 80 more years. Probably. Maybe. Hopefully, right?
Hopefully. Yeah.
I'm interested to see what books are like that, right? What books will be mentioned in the English classes?
Do you think there'll be classics in 80 years from this era?
I think there might be. Because...
Okay, like, you know, Mark Twain's, you know, Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah.
At the time when he was selling that, Ethan, he was selling through catalogs, and it was like the big thing. That was like the first like mail order books to ever. So it spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
Right? I think Harry Potter will be remembered, and
oh, of course, without a doubt.
I'm not sure. I'm sure something will take hold like that. But have you went back and watched like the release parties?
Oh well, no, but one of my swim coach, she was part of the original craze.
Yeah.
When it came to Harry Potter, she was like, oh, Harry Potter, blah blah blah. But then she read the first book, and then she said she was hooked.
I love Harry Potter. I think I might love Harry Potter more than anybody. But that's besides the point. At the time, you had millions of people worldwide stop everything the night it was released, go to parties to get the book, and stay up all night reading it. I don't see that happening again.
No, I don't either. But we have the internet now, guy, and people do that over other things.
That's true.
Like when a new video game's released, people will...
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And I have an anecdote to that. You might be familiar with the NBA 2K games, right? Mm-hmm. Well, a few years ago, there was a trick where you could change your time zone to Hong Kong, and you would get the game like 8 hours earlier. But with how it works with where we live, I would get it like 2 o'clock in the morning. So I would stay up, and I would wait for the game to come out at 2 in the morning, and then start playing. And that was just one of the most surreal experiences I've ever had. Because you would join calls with people, just waiting and waiting and waiting for the time to hit so that you can join this game and play and just try things out.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably a pretty similar experience to the Harry Potter parties.
Well, the last book came out in 2007, Deathly Hallows.
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, J.K. Rowling released The Cursed Child based off of her Broadway play.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I don't even consider that to be...
Yeah.
It was... I mean, I don't know if I can say this, and it was the biggest load of crap I've ever read in my entire life. It was terrible. It was terrible, but before that we didn't know. We knew it wasn't going to be a novel, but it was Harry Potter. It was a book, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And it was the transcript of the play. It was in screenplay format. So I went to Charlottesville. We were there to see Monticello anyways, and it happened to be the night that the book was released. So I went to the Barnes & Noble party in Charlottesville for the 12 o'clock release. And it was great.
Yeah.
It was great. And I got to experience that. At the time, nobody knew how bad it was going to be. And I respect J.K. Rowling and her work, but I don't know how much of that she really wrote.
Yeah.
She wrote it to other people. But that experience, I got to experience the whole craze of everybody waiting for the Harry Potter book to come out. And they bring it out in the boxes and they cut it open. It is magical. Yeah. It was a great experience.
I don't want to say that this is what she did, but some authors will definitely write an amazing first work, right? And have no intention of writing a second work or a third work. But they want to capitalize on the economic opportunity, right? The monetary opportunity. So, and this is really what happened with, I think, The Fifth Wave. One of our friends has just read The Fifth Wave. There's a second book, and I absolutely loved it, the first wave. The first book, The Fifth Wave. The second book, I can't even remember what it's called, but it was so bad. And I'm really confident.
Have you seen it happen with Harry Potter? Here's my...
With The Cursed Child, I think, maybe.
The Cursed Child, yes.
Yes.
Here's my argument for the original series, why it didn't happen.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
There's 7 years.
Right.
And in the first book, that's referenced many times.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you.
With the original series, I do think The Cursed Child was...
Yes, I agree with you. I think the 7 books she wanted to write it. Yeah. That was her goal. But I think she probably missed the
Fantastic Beasts too. Have you read Fantastic Beasts?
I haven't, no.
The movies. The first one I thought was great.
Yeah.
It was cute.
I think I've seen the movie.
As the series has progressed, and now they don't know if they're going to make the last 2. You can just tell this just...
Yeah, money, right?
Yeah.
And I was back to movies. The first Avatar movie, like the Blue People Avatar movie, it was wonderful. And when I heard that there was a second movie coming out, I was kind of worried. Because I was like, oh, I hope this isn't just a money grab.
But apparently that was...
It was amazing.
Yeah.
The second movie was also wonderful. I think it might be better than the first. And now there's going to be a third movie. I'm just hoping they're not money grabs. I hope that they're actual... I hope that's art form, right?
And this might be childish in a way. Despicable Me.
Yes, right.
Have you seen them all?
Right. Yeah, I have.
Have you seen the Minions movies?
Uh-huh.
Like, I've seen everything.
Yeah.
And you have too. So, the first movie, great.
Yes.
That's wonderful. The second movie, I love the second movie.
It's cute.
Yeah, I guess the first one. The third one's like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And then the Minions movies the first Minions movie's fine. Mm-hmm. The second one, I thought was terrible.
Yeah, they're out there and they're meant to make 6-year-olds laugh, and they do that.
And it did. But I remember when the original one came out, and how great that was. Mm-hmm. I watched the original one not that long ago. I still think it's good.
Yeah. And the Marvel movies, right? Originally, they had an idea. It was unique. It was creative, and they executed on it brilliantly. But now every movie is the same thing with different characters.
Yeah, and you can see that with Star Wars television too. Now I'm going to make a lot of people mad here.
Yeah.
But Disney Star Wars it's not the best.
No. Not
the best. But yeah, I think originally when stories are created, they're made for the story, but after time they get commercialized.
Right.
And it becomes more about profit than story.
Right.
But I think that might just be the natural progression of a story too.
Yeah. And I wonder, I don't know much about the creative process of Harry Potter and how J.K. Rowling chose to write the books.
She was very poor. She was on government welfare in Great Britain.
But, I mean, did she kind of lay out the series all at the beginning? Did she do it as she go? How did that work?
She had an overarching plan.
Mm-hmm.
And some people will say that's a lie because that's just how some people are.
Right.
She didn't have every single thing planned out, but she had an overarching story she wanted to do.
Right. And I think that's where the good stuff is. Yeah. But when you have an idea for a first work, or maybe even a second work, but then nothing after that, and you start making the next ones because of money, then I think that's where it goes wrong.
Modern series are, and a lot of things today aren't produced to hold up to detailed analysis.
That's true.
They're meant to be consumed, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's why classics, in a sense, why it's been refreshing here recently. Standalones.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
It's a story.
Mm-hmm.
It's an actual story without the thought of having to need anything else to it. And I think today you see a fantasy book come out, and 9 times out of 10 it's 1 of 7.
Yeah.
1 of 10. And that's great. There's series that are meant for that, like Malazan, Book of the Fallen, The Wheel of Time. There's series that are extremely long, but that's that was their niche the niche at that time. Today, I don't think every series needs to be.
No, I agree. And
absolutely not.
The Ender's Game series, I think, is one of those special cases. It's written by Orson Scott Card. There's something like 20 books in the series, yeah. And he's been working on them for 30 years, and they all go together. There's a huge universe. They all fit together, and I don't think he does it for money, because
the author loves his story, and they can keep that flowing.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. But if they've just written the first book and it's already planned to be 7, I think there's a lot of fatigue that takes place, creative fatigue.
I would agree. Yeah. And I think if you're really passionate about the story and the work that you're creating, you could probably avoid that somewhat.
Yeah.
But I think some authors go into it with like, oh, I'm going to make the next big thing, and I'm going to make a lot of money. Yeah. And I think that's the wrong mindset to have. I think if you're going to write something, then you should do it because you want to see the story exist.
And with movies like that too. With movies today.
Yeah.
Think about in most of the movies most people enjoy, they come from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Or before. At that time, they wrote those movies as standalones. Think about E.T.,
mm-hmm.
right? Many other different movies that came out at that time. They're classics today. They're still loved. And today we're making spin-offs of them now to try to capture that nostalgia.
Right.
At the time they were made, it was just a story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people give standalone stories the patience anymore to just be a story and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You take a classic novel, you can read, and I think that's what's so romantic about it. You could take a book and read it in a day, and you had a story.
Mm-hmm.
And you can learn from it, you can enjoy it, and that's it.
And I don't usually read biographies, but right now I'm reading a biography on Richard Feynman. It was written by James Gline, I think. I'm probably butchering his last name. But like you said, it's a story, right? It's not necessarily meant to be entertaining. It's not necessarily meant to be a bestseller. It's telling a story about someone. And our audience may not be familiar with Richard Feynman. He was a scientist who worked with Oppenheimer on the Manhattan Project, and he taught at Caltech, and he's got a series of lectures on physics that he's absolutely famous for. It's regarded as the best educational resource on physics ever to be created. But I'm reading his biography right now, and James Gline is telling his story beautifully. It's going from his time as a child in New York and how he was Jewish and how that created certain problems for him. Like, he wasn't admitted into Columbia University solely because he was Jewish. So he ends up at MIT, and then he ends up at Princeton, and then he ended up at Los Alamos working on the Manhattan Project, and now he's at where I'm at in the story. He's back teaching at a university, and eventually he'll get to Caltech where he did the bulk of his educational work. And it's just amazing how
to see a person's life laid
yes,
out like
and it talks about his love interests and the letters that he sent to his first wife and how she suffered from tuberculosis and how his mother was worried that his wife having tuberculosis would negatively affect his reputation and it would give him a stigma. And it's just amazing to see how intricate and detailed his life was.
And especially with biographies, you think of these men as just, that's what they did, their job. Oppenheimer, the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
All these men had really personal lives, very personal, not very personal lives, they had very intense personal lives too.
Yes.
That sometimes equally affected the work that they did. It wasn't just the work that they did. They had families, wives, girlfriends. They had all this stuff that they had going on as well, and it really humanizes them too. Like, oh man, and that sucks.
Yeah, and then when Feynman's wife dies, he's kind of numb to it initially, and you're like, oh, like how could you not care that your wife dies? But then he sees a dress in a store, and he thinks, oh, she would have really liked that, and he just breaks down. Oh. And it really shows how he dealt with the grief and how he survived after the love of his life died.
Yeah.
And it's very human, right? It shows that he was not only a lecturer at Caltech, he was not only a scientist.
No, he was a husband.
He was a husband. And he loved, and he was a son, and he was a brother.
And I think that's what a lot of people, they make these people be out of granite. And they're not.
No.
And they just lived human lives, and then they died.
Yeah, and Feynman had not to make this all about Feynman, but Feynman had a lot of faults. He was not a very...
Oppenheimer had a lot of faults.
Right, Oppenheimer had a lot of faults.
Oppenheimer lived an extremely intense personal life as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than most.
Yeah.
But yeah, and autobiographies too. I have never read an autobiography.
Mm.
And I've kind of placed a kind of a stigma on autobiographies.
Yeah.
Because I see it as propaganda by that person.
Right.
And I'm not sure how much of it's true. And sometimes that person hasn't even wrote it.
Yeah.
It's ghostwritten by somebody else. I do want to read President Obama's novel, or autobiography. I think it's called The Promised Land.
Mm-hmm.
There's an audio. He did the audio book for it. I'm not a big audiobook guy, but he narrated the audio book, and I've listened to clips of it. He's an incredible audiobook narrator. I want to listen to it.
I didn't know that he narrated it.
Yeah.
Walter Isaacson, speaking of biographies.
Musk.
Yeah, he just recently wrote a biography on Elon Musk, and I think that'd be...
Are you a fan of Isaacson? I think me and your dad talked about it. I don't think your dad liked his Jobs book.
I don't remember what my dad said about him, but I would like to read his Musk book. I just think it'd be interesting.
You should read his Jobs book, too. I want to read his Franklin book, too, but he just came out the Musk one. Yeah,
and I think it's kind of anticlimactic to write a book about someone who's still going to do a lot more.
That's yeah.
Because Elon Musk he's, I don't know, 50s maybe, right?
Yeah.
I know he's not done doing stuff.
No, but there also has to be kind of a race to happen to write the first major biography on somebody.
That's fair. Yeah. Musk is 52. Yeah. So yeah, I know he's not done doing stuff.
But God forbid he makes it to Mars, and what's Walter Isaacson? That book's going to be extremely outdated.
Yeah. Right. And I guess it'll be interesting to look at the progression. Oh, this was his first biography, then the second, but I don't know. It doesn't really sit well with me. I do agree that he was probably just trying to capitalize on the current.
I think Walter Isaacson's a great writer, and I'm not saying he was capitalizing.
Oh no.
To make a lot of money, which I'm sure he will make a lot of money. I'm sure that has to.
Oh, I'm sure.
Making a living has to be a factor in it, but I'm not saying he just did it for the money. Because he spent a lot of time with Elon Musk.
Yes, he did.
An extreme amount of time. I'm thinking he might want to place his name on Musk before anybody else does.
Yeah. I can see that, and people regard him as the original Musk writer. Right?
Absolutely, because biographies are something that it's mainstream, but it's not extremely popular. Everywhere you go right now, whether it's Walmart, Target, any bookstore, Walter Isaacson's Musk is in a stand somewhere. And I think for a biography, that's big.
Lex did an interview with him about... Yeah. Did you listen to it? Yeah, right now it's $6 on Amazon as an audiobook.
Which one?
The Musk.
Musk one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, $21 hardcover. It was 35 though, like a lot. But, anyways, this episode's gone off the rails. But, yeah, it's just this was a work of literature that was written because Orwell had a story that he wanted to tell. He wasn't doing it for money. He wasn't doing it for fame. He used a pen name. Like he wasn't trying to be famous.
No.
He was passionate about a subject and he had a story to tell, and he told it the best that he could. Right.
And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was good, and it was a warning to future generations.
Again, something that leaves you with something to think about.
Right.
I think most of the books that we've covered have done that.
Yes, and I got to the end of the book and I just kind of chuckled because it's incredibly ironic.
The only thing I'd recommend is making a live action movie off of it.
Yeah.
But, yep, that was George Orwell's Animal Farm and some analysis on modern media culture.
Yeah.
So, thank you.